What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode at the Takeover Media podcast. I have a good friend here and a partner we work with at Takeover Media is Jesse Clemens, is the CEO and co-founder of High Tide, which is one of my hands down favorite tools to use with brands. What's up, Jesse? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind intro.
Yeah. So we Jesse and I have some cool things that we're going to share on the podcast today that I want to dig in with. But before we do that, would love to, Jesse, High Tide was, I think I met Angus first on your team from High
Hmm.
Tide in New York, and I had never heard of it to that point, but it was fairly new at that time. So you just started last year,
Yep.
early last year. Tell us a little bit about you and how High Tide came to be.
Yeah. So High Tide is a solution for e-commerce brands. What we do in a nutshell is help bridge social and owned channels like SMS and email. And we'll obviously get into the details for the listeners in a bit. High Tide came about as a pivot, like many startup stories. My co-founders and I were working on a totally different concept a couple years back. The concept was a solution for creators. At the time, the creator economy was, really hot sector for building, and we got excited about some ideas relating to helping creators to kind of triage their incoming messages. So we talked to a bunch of creators. They all said that one of the things that was stressing them out was the inability to stay on top of the messages and the kind of situation of having 100 low value messages mixed in with one really high value business opportunity type message on Instagram DMs or TikTok or YouTube comments, whatever. We started building a solution. It was a really cool solution. We got a bunch of creators onboarded, but we really couldn't find the right path to monetization for this product. And it was kind of like ended up being kind of a nice to have type software, which is definitely not a position you want to be in when you're building software. But we did, at that time have a sort of interesting revelation, which was we were trying to figure out how to build more value for these creators. And we knew that some of them had text lists, SMS lists. And we knew that if we were in control of messaging, we could move some of those messages into text signups. And we experimented a little bit with the creator kind of intersection of creator and brand, where we had creators that were like selling one of a kind paintings, for example, that wanted to let their audience know about when the next collection was dropping. And it worked really, really well. It's like, by far, like no question, way more valuable than anything else we had built previously. And we kind of thought about it and we're like, this is a great solution, but it's for the wrong customer set. We should have this for brands that have really firm grasp of the value of their own channels like SMS, where they already have an equation of like it costs me X dollars to create a new SMS subscriber to get a new marketing opt-in, and I want to do it more efficiently. I already know it works. I want to do more of it, as opposed to the creator side where it was like, okay, texting my followers probably interesting. Maybe I'll use it sometimes. I'm not really sure, and certainly no cost per lead acquisition type thinking. All of this had come out of, for me, more than a decade in marketing and advertising. I worked on the ad side at Meta for a whole bunch of years. I worked at Google for some years and a couple of startups in between, all geared towards helping brands and publishers connect to monetize ad inventory on the publisher side. Met up with my amazing co-founders, Marius and Andre, a few years back. We started jamming on this creator idea. We moved onto it full time. And then via the pivot, we started helping brands to acquire more email subscribers and SMS subscribers and collect zero party data along the way. And so here we are today with a pretty cool platform that I'm excited to talk more about.
Yeah, it is I actually didn't before this podcast. I didn't realize you were at Meta as well. I knew when I got intro,
Yeah.
that was a piece that was like, yeah, it was at Meta and they built this cool thing. And I was like, oh, sweet. But I didn't realize you were there too. That was like, that's
Yeah.
on your LinkedIn, 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. We worked, Angus and I worked closely together there. Angus, for the listeners, Angus is leading our agency efforts. Good friend of mine and colleague here at High Tide. We've known each other for years, and really great group of people coming out of the, call it like 2010 to 2018 era of online advertising, where like all of these crazy API systems were built with real-time bidding and per impression pricing, and the whole advertising ecosystem had changed from deals that were done on like a martini lunch upfront buy type of way with traditional sales folks, and moving into like audience targeting and cookies and retargeting and exchange-based buying and everything that like really fundamentally powers the advertising ecosystem today. It was a really exciting time, and lots of great people coming out of that adventure.
Yeah, this is not on topic with what we're chatting about, but I'm going to ask you anyway. I had a friend a while back. I used to an org I worked with. I was the head of sales for North America, and I got to meet like a lot of really crazy people. Like Richard Branson was one of them, and I was running around with some of his team because we were working on, it was when he was launching the new Virgin cruise line, and he was looking
Cool.
the equipment that I was selling. We sold it was like in the health and wellness space. He wanted this cruise line to be the average American on his cruise, I think it was like the stat was like gains like 15 pounds or something like that. And he wanted to like reverse that. And like he wanted to have this cruise where people actually like got healthier and maybe lost weight, or at least like didn't gain weight.
Not
Anyway,
a bad idea.
yeah, cool thing. So one of the guys that I talked to most, I mean, to be clear to everyone listening, I met Richard actually once. So like that wasn't who we were dealing with. The guy that we were mostly dealing with, he was telling me about that he had this buddy. So it's like he said, she said, that went and got a tour of Facebook. And this was back in 2016. Yeah. He got a tour of Facebook. He said they had the shit that Facebook knows about you is scary. He's like, he brought me into this room and he showed me like he could predict like if you're going to have a baby, if you're going to get married, if you're going to get divorced, or like these types of things, like with scary accuracy. Is that true?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When I worked at Facebook, anytime I was at the Thanksgiving family reunion, whatever, the number one question that came up was always, all right, so how do they do the thing where the microphone is listening so that they can serve me the ad? If I was talking about a Yeti cooler with my buddies yesterday, like how does that all work? And it was actually quite tiresome because the answer is so freaking boring. It's just that the amount of data that's generated by interacting with content, and the pairing of that with an understanding of your social graph means that if you and I, Ethan, were having a beer yesterday, and you were spending a lot of time on Yeti that morning, I'm probably going to get a Yeti ad too, because it's like, all right, well, these two are interacting. They interact a lot on Facebook. Maybe they were in physical proximity. Let's show Jesse the Yeti ad cooler and see what happens. And as a consumer, the experience, at times it can be kind of magical because you're like, seeing an ad for something that you just learned about, and that's cool. And sometimes it can be a little jarring because you're like, wait a minute, how did that private conversation get turned into an ad on my phone? And the boring reality is just like the ad targeting based on what you're doing on your phone is so good that it can feel like your conversation was overheard. But hopefully it's hopefully that kind of like description makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It
is simpler than I thought.
It's simpler than you thought, but it's not fun. Like I would get to the end of that explanation at Thanksgiving, and family members like, yeah, okay, dude, pass the gravy.
Yeah, it's I kind of like it. People complain about that often, or their privacy issues. No, I'm not saying there shouldn't be privacy things in place for sure, but I get served a lot of shit on Instagram that I really
Yeah.
don't Like most of my favorite brands I have found via an ad on
Oh,
Instagram,
oh,
like
totally.
golf gear and all that kind of shit, you know?
Totally. I mean, like the stuff that, like with the combination of the ease of creating new consumer brands and products paired with the ability to actually reach people that are interested in those products, pretty cool time to be a consumer. I mean, I was like literally every day I come across something new that, you know, maybe I might not buy it, but I'm interested in it. I have a dog that's 9 years old here. She's starting to need some like joint supplements and medications and stuff. And I'm like dealing with all these like pill bottles basically. And it's kind of a pain in the butt to like go through them each day. And last night I was like winding down for the night and I'm like, you know, finishing up my work, looking at a brand on Instagram for the work that we do. And suddenly I get this ad for the most beautifully designed pill box with a magnetic cover, and the whole thing is built like an Apple product, and it's $100 metal pill organizer. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I want that. I want that. That would make the dog medication thing so much more fun. And it's just like wild what people come up with and can actually sell you. And then back in my mind, I'm like, dude, you do not need to spend $100 on a pill case for your
The
dog. It's
question is,
ridiculous.
did you?
I did not. I did not. So you know, Christmas is coming around. I might let Santa know.
Put that on the list. Yeah. Uh, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit more about kind of High Tide and what you're doing with some brands. Like you've interacted and had experience like yourself across several companies, but now with High Tide too, talking to like lots of people and seeing, you know, things that work, things that don't, um, crazy things that have come out of, you know, different campaigns, and we've talked about a few. But one thing that I'm really bullish on with everyone that I work with is, you know, the concept of getting people onto channels that they own, which is how I, you know,
Yes.
found High Tide and why I'm a big fan. Because like, you know, we have several folks that we work with, talk to, have over the years that have tons of following, 50,000, 100,000, million followers on Instagram, and they get good engagement. They post a lot. They have good content. They have a product people like. But to your point that you were talking about earlier, the ability to kind of communicate with those people effectively through that channel, or even measure what's happening, is another big
Yes.
problem. When I'm working with brands, like you're doing all this work and creating all this content,
Yes.
but you know, how do you measure it, and like
Yeah.
how do you justify spend on an agency to help you out with this, or an internal person? Like, you know, what are those metrics? So I know I just kind of threw a high level out there, but in terms of like what you've seen with folks getting people onto like an SMS channel through Instagram, like what types of I guess what types of impact, or have you seen on like folks, the metrics they're looking at, and how they kind of how they're starting to monetize that a bit more, instead of and having some finite numbers that, you know?
Yeah. So one of the most interesting things that we saw at the very beginning of kind of the journey of building this platform that still remains true is there's a kind of shocking number of highly engaged followers on a typical brand's Instagram account that will comment on posts, like things. You know, some of them may have purchased before, some of them haven't, some of them are, you know, on the high intent list, and they're just not on your email or SMS list yet. We, you know, when we get connected with a brand, one of the first things brands will do to get set up is start posting content that asks for engagement of some type. This could be like, okay, a new product is dropping next week. It's limited edition. And this is from the brand's voice. If you want, you know, early access or to be the first to know about the product availability, you know, a week, you know, tag a friend in the post comments below. That will inevitably surface people that love engaging with the content, that are, you know, seeing your content all the time, but for some reason have not made it into the email or SMS capture on your website. Either the offer wasn't compelling enough for them, you know, maybe they didn't get the pop-up. Maybe they've been a bunch of times and only, you know, plan to give marketing consent right before they purchase, but they're really into the brand and they're willing to actually sign up for a email or text list if there's something of value that's provided that doesn't ask them to leave the stickiest consumer surface on the face of the earth, which is the Instagram feed. And so what we've seen overall when a brand launches with High Tide, something roughly in the degree of like 60% of the phone numbers that are tapped into DM that we can help brands collect with proper marketing consent, about 60% of them are actually net new subscribers. When we first launched this, one of the big questions was, okay, well, is this kind of, your highest intent people, they're probably already on your list, right? The people that are like commenting on your posts or that are DMing you as a brand, like probably you already have them on your text list, right? Like it's the other 80% of people that you're constantly trying to find that you want to get onto the list, not the most engaged people. But actually it's the opposite. Like a lot of those people are really high intent and they're just haven't signed up to your text list yet. That was, one of the promising early signs that made us say like, hey, there's something really cool here. Let's go all in on it.
Was that surprising at all? Like at the time when you were looking at that?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. It was a matter of much discussion early on. But we started launching with a beta of the product. It was, it actually wasn't even productized because we had like scrapped the creator app that we had built, which had similar underlying functionalities, but was not relevant to the brand experience that we needed for analytics, revenue tracking, et cetera. And we just kind of like manually, the classic startup stuff, for like manually managing these campaigns. And we emailed a whole bunch of brands. We asked them to, if they wanted to try out this thing that we were building, we'd do it for free and we would do all the work for them. And in exchange, they got back a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet said, okay, here's how many subscribers you got, and here's how many are new versus existing. And they give us logins to their SMS platforms and everything. And when we started looking at the numbers, like, wow, this is actually a really untapped channel. And not only is it tapped, but it's like many brands have not mitigated the risk of having what in the creator world we used to call it like a rented channel, meaning like social is incredibly important for many different reasons, and at the same time it's also not something that you have full control over in terms of like reaching people. You might have, this is like so obvious, but you might have like 100,000 followers, and one post you might reach 1,000 of them, and another post you might reach 50,000 of them. And it's not always clear why certain posts get out and get distributed and others don't. But most importantly, when you have people on your email or SMS list, for all practical counts, like when you send an email or an SMS blast, if you have 100,000 people on a text list, 100,000 people are going to get that text. Obviously some minor exceptions to the rule, but the comparison in the creator world, if you look at how people think about email lists in the creator world, because SMS isn't really a big thing in the creator world. I don't know if it will be, but it's not today. When people think about email lists, if you look at any like kind of the people that produce content around creator strategy, it's all about this owned versus rented channel. Social is rented. It can go away at any time. Your account can get blocked, banned. You might, lose all your followers. Who knows what could happen? But, when you have those people on an email list, you can actually reach them. And it's much, it's obviously not zero risk, but much more dependable. And you can really drive if you're looking to build a real business as a brand or a creator, having people on a channel that you own, you control, and that you can take from one place to the other is really critical.
Yeah, and even what you can distribute through those channels too. Like, for example, we work with a lot of health and wellness related brands, and like Meta's pretty fucking picky about what you can and can't say in terms of like health benefits, for example, in advertisement. Or even like you can get, like you said, slapped with some things if you talk about that stuff too much in DMs and such. So like, you don't own it. You have to, even if what you're saying is very true, honest, the truth, like, hey, these people did this cleanse and they lost 8 pounds. Well, that may be fact and true, and you've got documentation. Meta doesn't care. You can't say those kind of things. Right?
Fascinating. Yeah.
Unrealistic claims or things like that. So we
Yeah.
do a lot of that, and that's why I always stress to like get folks onto the channel. And it's funny you mentioned the email side. I would think at 2024, like SMS would be like a very obvious no brainer that everyone should be focused on building. But I worked specifically, there was a brand that I worked with about a year ago, and they sold men's underwear, like provocative men's underwear. Huge followings on social. And when we actually started digging in and we started working with them, we were looking at opportunities for them to grow. I got into their Klaviyo account, and they only had around 14,000 SMS, which, like I say, only, like, that's a decent size SMS list, but I've seen much bigger.
How many followers did they have? Like, I don't know, ballpark.
It was like
huge following?
95,000.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So they're
But because of the nature of their posts and what they're selling, they get nerfed a lot on Meta, and they get routine problems, banned or restricted, and they got to go through the appeal process. And like they always got it back out. It was just a giant headache. And I was listening to those problems, and I looked at the Klaviyo. Dude, his SMS revenue from just that 14,000 was calculated like 20% of monthly revenue was coming from SMS alone inside of his Klaviyo account. And I was like, that's the moment of which, like, I not long after I learned about High Tide. And that's where I started really zeroing in on it with brands, because I know like a lot of folks have huge email lists, but the only thing they're doing for SMS is like just their pop-up, or if they buy something, give them your phone number, and at that point, those are like kind of your two options. Getting creative there.
Yeah, there another thing that made us excited about what we're building is there hadn't been, like, last year especially, there hadn't been a ton of innovation in the SMS growth space. Like there were many variants of pop-up strategies, and that's still such a hot space.
And important.
Important. That conversion rate for the web pop-up, like anyone that can move the conversion rate up by a couple points, it's like done, no brainer. Let's get it onboarded. But outside of that, on the social side, the two main things that really existed were social short links, which is like the experience where if there's a link in a story, and I say story because you can't put a link on a post or on a feed post, a reel or a carousel or an image post. On a story, you could, for many of the major text providers, you could tap out on a link that would, I say would, I mean, like, this is like the default experience for many mobile joins, assembles the keyword text in your phone for the user, and then you send it in and you're on the list. And that was like, okay, that's pretty cool. That works. And then the other thing was QR codes, like, COVID QR codes popping up on every, or instead of every restaurant menu pretty much for most people. And there's a bunch of cool companies doing QR code. Yeah, still. There's a bunch of cool companies like, making it easier to create QR codes and putting them on products so people can then end up, signing up for the warranty or joining your SMS program or whatever else. And that's really important for brands of all types, but obviously most important for brands that want to build these own channels. But beyond that, it's like, what else is there? There's not much else for list growth. And we saw a real lane here in pairing together this powerful DM technology that Meta had recently kind of like rolled out as an authorized program, and SMS. And that was like the real game changer. A couple years ago, you could not do this. There was a bunch of gray solutions that were like, okay, as long as you're careful with it, you probably, were okay with Instagram. But there was no safe solution that was authorized by Instagram. And so, almost all brands stayed away from that stuff, rightfully so. And Meta rolled out this messaging program that gave you the ability to actually move comments into what they call a private reply, which is a DM based on a comment, and also send instant responses and short automations to people that were sending in DMs. And those two things together were pretty game changing, and have been a great kind of like starting point for us to build the platform.
Yeah. Well, I love the platform. I don't want to give away all the goods because Jesse and we're going to be doing a webinar coming up where we're going to dig into a lot of these things very deeply. There'll come some materials for you that you can take away. I'm going to talk more on my side of like things you can do to help boost the effectiveness of implementing something like High Tide and overall, because for me, like this is a game changer and moving people through the funnel. So a lot of times I shouldn't say, my earlier in my career was much focused on sales. That's where I started. I like dropped out of school. I was like, this isn't for me. And I wanted to, do something that made money. And I started in sales, and in sales, you get trained and trained and trained and trained on the buyer journey. The more complex sales that you get into, the higher ticket and such. And it gets beaten to your head through every part of your career. And a lot of times we kind of, at least what I see when I work with, brands, marketers, or people that maybe they're not marketers, but they're trying to be because they have a brand, is we kind of forget about that. And there's a very high percentage of folks they may be like aware of you on Instagram. Maybe they saw a post, they clicked follow, but like to your point, they're not on your list. Maybe they've never been to your website, but you know who you are on Instagram. And we put those here at my agency, put those in the awareness bucket, and that like they're at least somewhat aware of what you do, and maybe that they have a problem or thing that you help with that they're aware of. But they're not into the next phase, which is consideration. And that is when someone might buy at that point. Like almost no one buys the top of funnel. And at the consideration phase, it's a lot more likely to buy. And there's different ways that you walk people through that funnel, but one of the biggest factors is SMS and email from that, moving them from awareness into consideration. And you just can't do that if you don't have their information. And if you're actually putting energy on social media, High Tide is my favorite tool to give you a way to access those people and connect with them, talk to them, send them and help through the funnel, because it's really hard to do on social alone. To your point of impressions earlier, you might make a post today that this person sees, and you make a post that builds on that 2 days from now, but they didn't see that one for that reason. So it's been very impactful for me.
For those kind of like fundamentals, actually one of the things that was interesting for me moving from the creator space into the e-commerce space, so there's such a crazy number of startup brands out there, and I continuously run into, in conversation with brands, certain best practices that seem kind of obvious, but just kind of got lost along the way. Whether that's like, something simple like, optimizing your pop-up, like trying to like make some changes to your pop-up every once in a while to try to get that conversion rate up. But things that are just like not touched, because many of these brands are a couple people, maybe some funding, maybe bootstrapped. If they're doing things right, they're growing pretty fast. And just like any other startup, they have no time. And so like anything that's not broken and that's not, incredibly like easy to understand the ROI of, they're not doing. And sometimes they'll like zoom out on the marketing journey is one of those things where they're like doing all these initiatives, but it's not necessarily done in a way that's thought towards how a consumer moves from awareness to conversion. So what I was curious about for you is like, I know you work with brands of various sizes, but like, how do you kind of like get that? How do you start a relationship with a brand to get them kind of oriented around the journey? And then like, I assume the execution also maps to that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, we're not a big mass agency, right? We work very, very closely with the brands that we work with, hand in hand on lots of things outside of just marketing. But what I always like start with is, I find, if we zoom out a little bit to one of your points, to your point of like, hey, we're growing, things are going well, it's not broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. This is a natural human bias of loss aversion. People will work harder to not lose $50 than they would to gain $100. They'll work a lot harder not to lose 50. And so what I try to do with my brands is like educate them in that way. So if you flip a funnel on its head and stop thinking about, you stop thinking about only the conversion and you visualize this, I usually show, which I'll show on the webinar as a visual, like I forget the actual stat, but like it's only like 1 point something percent of the people that visit your site, the people that check you out on social or whatever, that are in this very bottom of the funnel ready to buy right now.
Right.
And why, if you're going to spend 50,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million on marketing this year, why would you only think about that 1.5% that every other fucking brand in the world is also going after? And what folks aren't doing, now people are, some will do it very well, but what a lot of brands aren't doing, and this happens a lot, startup brands typically do it a lot when they just get going, and then it ventures off because, like you said, they get busy, it's a small team, they're having growing pains and they forget about it. But if you focus instead on the other 95% of people that aren't quite there yet, with just a couple nudges via text, via email, retargeting some ads that aren't just like, hey, buy our thing. So what I do is I show them, I break that down and make it simpler, because you can get real complicated with this. Like I forget, the Gartner put out a report of like last year on like the new buyer's journey, and it is like a full-sized white paper of all these zigs and zags and boxes and if-thens and that's, and like that's true. Like it is that complicated at an enterprise level. For a consumer level, not usually quite as complicated, but still, they got a lot going on in their life.
Right.
And what happens to, I see a lot of brands, sometimes it's obvious. So if you sell, let's take your example. You sell this pill box that helps people organize all of their pills for their dog, or it probably isn't specifically for the dog. I don't know if it was or not, but probably just a pill organizer in general, right?
Yes.
And you sell this really nifty thing that's really cool. When people have it, they love it. But like, there's not a lot of people out there that are searching for a pill container organizer.
Right.
But like, people that would buy that, what might they be thinking about, or what might they be searching for? They could be looking for, let's say, in your case, we'll just go with your stuff. You might be looking for CBD gummies to help with your dog's pain and joints or something like that. Right. Or you might be looking for different things that you might feed your dog that will help his joints, and how you might alter his nutrition in a natural way to help without this medication. So if I'm these people, what I'm going to do for an awareness stage buyer is I'm going to create content, both written, video, image, all the above, email, SMS, that demonstrates like, hey, Jesse, are you looking for like the 3 best things you could feed your dog to help with their joint health? Check this out. So then Jesse gets hit with that ad because you are thinking about your dog and you're searching for things for your dog and it's relevant for you. Now you read this ad of this helpful information. Oh, I didn't know that this food did that. Oh, that's a great idea. Think about mixing in this oil with their dog food or whatever it might be, right? You learned something. And now you also are aware of who that brand is. And inside of that article, we're not going to pitch them on this pill container.
Right.
We're simply going to be looking, hey, Jesse, was this helpful? We put out a lot of content like this. Join our list. We'll send you the next thing we put out. And so
That's
Jesse
such a great, yeah.
And then the next step that Jesse is going to get retargeted with an ad, because now he's in consideration. He's moved into the next stage of like, I know who this brand is. They help me solve a problem. So now what I can do is I can show you how my thing directly helps solve your problem. So then the next stage of that funnel is, hey, Jesse, I know you're doing a lot of things to take care of your dog, but like, here's how insert brand helps you never miss a beat and make sure your dog always has all the proper nutrients and medications that he needs. And it will be an article explaining routines or things like this, and it will be selling the product to help you do that better. And then the last people that don't buy there, they're in the conversion stage, they just need a little nudge. They need an offer. That could be a coupon you text over to them. That could be an ad you hit them with that's like, hey, get 10% off today. And that's how you work people through the funnel.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we actually had a kind of it's something that came to mind is in a real world kind of example of a similar strategy. We had a brand that sells bar equipment, like home bar equipment, cocktail shakers, mixers, yeah, that kind of stuff. And a lot of their content was, no surprise, it was about cocktails and recipes. And what they did was they had like kind of seasonal cocktails. They were highlighting them in reels, and then they had a call to action that was, comment recipe for the recipe for the cocktail, and they used that as an opportunity to send the recipe out. I forget whether it was by email or SMS, but basically, sending the recipe to people. And to your point, they weren't pitching anything directly. They weren't like, buy our thing like immediately, but it was giving something of value and associating with their brand. And it's fun to see these kind of examples, because my exposure in this software that we're building is like very specifically about social, bridging social and owned channels and lead acquisition and zero party data and things like that. But seeing it play out as a step in this bigger consumer journey that you're talking about in the funnel, it's pretty cool, and it's kind of inspiring.
Yeah. And if you do it and commit to it and you align your spend that way too, like more of spend with my clients, like within very short amounts of time, we generally have a significant increase in like blended ROAS, significant increase in, lists that we're building and such, and revenue increase while decreasing the amount we're spending on marketing. And if you actually break down like what we're spending there, the majority of the budget goes into the first two buckets, which are awareness and consideration. And when you commit to that, it doesn't even take that long, 30 days, 60 days. What starts happening is those are building lists very rapidly. You are converting on those lists if you're doing things right on the back end with email and SMS. So you're getting more sales organic, even though they did come from a paid thing at first, which is why I'm really big on attribution and mapping that out. But that's another conversation. You're building that and growing that, and sales are increasing a lot, and you're not directly paying for that sale. And then also all those people that went through that process that did not buy are now creating a significant, like one of my clients just last month went from the month before last, they were like at a 1.2 ROAS, and now they're at a 19x ROAS. And it's because now all those people that did not buy at those earlier stages, when they do get placed like an actual product ad, it's much higher uptake because they've gone to your website, you've given them some value, maybe they've given you information, they know who you are. Because if you read an article about a recipe from, you're probably going to go look and see like, who are these people? Like this, if you read something you like, you generally, the next human thing is to like, who said this? Like, that's what I do. Like if I read something in sales, I immediately want to know, well, what's this person experience? Where do they work? Where do they do this? Like, how is this relevant for me? That's what people want to look. And if you show them that it is working through the funnel, everything else works better. So I could talk about this all day, but it's when brands commit to it, it works like magic. It looks like magic, but it's not.
I love it. I'm excited to learn more about the kind of the like some of the content strategies you guys are doing for your brands. I know we're going to go into depth on some of that stuff on the webinar. On my side, I'm hoping to share just some kind of like general practices about converting people from social to owned channels, which no surprise given the product that I sell. But I'm going to kind of share like a higher level picture of that. I'm really excited to get your reaction on, of like some of the ad ecosystem changes that have happened in the last couple of years and why it's harder than ever to get that like this type of ROAS results you're talking about, and like just harder to reach people in general. And some of what I plan to share will be like, all right, how can you use social in a way that better captures people for your own channels and your lists? And a lot of what I plan to describe is achievable on a small scale manually. Like you can kind of string together social coordination and some various tools that are out there. And then of course, if you want to do this stuff at higher scale, High Tide is the best way to do it. So yeah, planning to keep it kind of educational, my view of how things have changed recently, and really excited to hear how it maps to everything you guys are cooking up over there.
Yeah, man, it'll be good. We're going to cover a lot of good shit. We're going to kind of go into combining what Jesse's talking about with basically kind of the three pillars to unlock your growth. We're going to go into the funnel that you just say we're just breaking down a little bit. We're also going to talk about the offer and things you could do there, and like what your growth levers are, which High Tide and SMS is a big part of that for all my clients. And then some systems you need in place in order to kind of what Jesse's talking about, going from manually piecing things together to kind of more massive scale. So we're going to do that in just a couple of weeks. You can find the registration link in the show notes from this episode. And I will also have Jesse's information. Go give him a follow on LinkedIn. He posts a lot of good shit there every Friday. You do it every Friday, right?
Every Friday. Yes.
Every
It's
Friday.
called Ship It Friday. And,
Ship It
you know, when
Friday.
you're a startup, you can ship things every day, and you should ship things every day. But the Friday ship is fun because we kind of talk about everything that we built that week, what we're excited about, and just kind of a fun, quick video.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you again coming on, man. And I guess
Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you at the webinar.